Welcome to the As the Leader Grows podcast. I am your host, Ken Joslin, where we are ridiculously passionate about helping business leaders build confidence, gain clarity, and create community. We have brought like some guests in the month of October and November that have been absolutely unbelievable. I have got a phenomenal friend of mine who's going to be speaking on my stage in Atlanta at our Create conference in January, next to literally some amazing guys like Ed Milet, John Maxwell, friends of mine like Randy Garn and Amberly Lago and Carlos Reyes, and just some of the top people. And I am super excited to be able to present to you guys today and in January, Miss January Donovan. Her name is January. She's not Miss January like she was, in a pageant or something. But anyway, her name is January as well. January and her husband, Ryan, own the women's school and the men's school, where it is basically skill training and teaching women practical mindset to where they can become the best version that God intended and desired for them to be. January, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's an honor, my friend. I'm grateful to be here and just share hearts, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to dig deep.
Take a minute, and we've been off air talking for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Take a minute and share with our audience a little bit about what you and Ryan have got going on, a little bit about what you've built, and then we're going to jump into some. I've got this really cool quote that I got from you that we're going to talk about. We're going to open it up with that.
Awesome. Well, my story began that I have been training women on practical skills for 15 years, never charged a dime. Didn't really think it was important until I realized that when women don't pay, they don't pay attention. And I had this dream to build a school for women, because really there's no place to learn how to be a woman. I would dare say there's no place to learn how to be human today. The most basic foundations of life are almost assumed that we just know, and the world dramatically changed in the last 100 years. And I think there's a massive oversight in training. So 3.5 years ago, we built the women's school, because that was my first passion. But then the women were saying, we need stuff for men. We need training for men. And then we built the man's school. And from there, women and men wanted to say, how can we build a business around training men and women on practical mindset and skill sets? So then we built the wholeness coaching department, and we have 300 coaches and we're in 40 countries. And it just really grew, in just 3 years, exponentially in ways I really never imagined. I see myself as a teacher. I see myself as a trainer, and I'm a mom of 8. And my husband and I are building a business together, and really truly believe in both the integration of both family life and married life and business. And so I'm so grateful to be able to do what I get to do, and really giving women practical training on understanding their value. And so here we are 3.5 years later, and 8 kids later.
I know, right? You talked about one of your big things is helping women understand their value.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about what you mean when you say that. Like, give me a 90-second deep dive on what you mean when you say understanding their value.
Yes. So 90 seconds is a stretch, but I'll give it my best shot. So
3 minutes. We got about 40 minutes, so we're good.
So every person is born uniquely, in a sense that nobody will ever be that same person in history before, in the past and in the future. And there's evidence, and from a cellular level, from a DNA level, that we're an irreplaceable, unrepeatable human being, right? Mm-hmm. That's true. There's no person that's the same. And that's what makes us extremely valuable. Here's the problem. Our culture has placed conditions on what makes human being women valuable. Perfect body, our possessions, power, prestige, and what we produce. So now women are conditioned, meaning they're literally trained to think that what makes them valuable is how much money they have in the bank, their body, how many followers they have. So we are, there's a war between this idea that our value never changes based on what people think of us, how much money we have, because we're born an irreplaceable human being, but we've been told that we're only valuable if and when. So most women have not ever, I would say, pondered, wrestled that their value cannot ever be sold.
Mm.
Because what we are is unrepeatable human being. Therefore, our value can never be external, but rather God-given. And when a woman doesn't understand that as a core belief, we make choices based on what everybody else thinks makes us valuable. And that's where the unnecessary hardship happens. We go for success for the wrong reasons. We go for our body for the wrong reasons. We find the wrong man because we're trying to prove that we're valuable. And if women don't understand this, we could spend our life never knowing the gift that is within us. And that's our value.
So it's almost like I was on a long conversation. We talked a little bit about this just a minute ago, but I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and I was talking about the difference between, because they said, "Oh, you're religious." I'm like, no, I'm not religious at all. Well, I thought you were a pastor. Well, I am. And then so I had to walk them through really the four gospels. And I said, did you know that the only people Jesus ever really got pissed off at were religious people? Like religion is, you do A, B, C, and D correct, you and God are okay. So it's outward behavior, which makes you accepted by God. Where the gospel is, man, when you understand what Jesus has done for you, and you understand the love he has for you, and that his love for you isn't predicated on your performance, but it's solely based on you're a son or a daughter. When that revelation, when that hits your heart and your eyes are open, you're like, oh my gosh, he loves me. Change happens inward. And then the behaviors start to change because of the inward change. And it really is the same way. You're describing the same process when they don't understand their value.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that we're not raising men and women today to understand their value from a very young age. I'll like you more if you get a good grade. You get more attention if you make it to the soccer team. You'll get more prestige if you go to a college that's a prestigious college. We're literally systematically creating an infrastructure in our culture where you have to prove your value to make yourself valuable. But the human heart wants to believe they're valuable. But the conditions placed upon us burdens our heart. But it's not like we tell them from a very young age neurologically that, my worth is unconditional, it's irreplaceable, it can never be sold. And that needs to be the training that needs to happen and needs to be rewired in our brain. Because here's the thing is that our value determines the way we make choices. The man we find, the careers, how we mother. So we need to understand that our value can never be external, can never be based on how much money, who I know, who I don't know. Because here's the thing, people who feel like they have less money or they don't have the fame and fortune, they don't feel as valuable. And that's a disgrace. That's a dishonoring the fact that God made them valuable as they are. And I think that's something that we need to systematically change in our culture, is that we can't base people's value on anything external, but it's automatic, Ken, right? You see somebody who has a nice house. Yeah. You kind of be like, I always say, I'm like, if a billionaire called you and said, I'm going to come into your house, would you clean your house the same if a janitor from your school called you? Would you fix your house the same way? And you'd be like, oh, let me just tidy up for this billionaire. Or is that human person equally the same, whether a janitor or a billionaire, simply because they're a human person and they deserve to be treated with greater reverence and respect? And most people would probably clean their house upside down for a billionaire, not for the janitor. Treat people better because they have nicer clothes. We're conditioned all day long. It's and I think people are suffering because here's the problem. If we think that what makes us valuable is everything external, we buy all the things that makes us valuable. We chase all the wrong things. I'll buy the purse because I'm going to be valuable and somebody thinks I'm valuable. And it's this rat race and rabbit hole of depression.
So what are some of the first steps walking a woman through? What are some of the first steps you take a woman through to help them really understand the value that they have?
Yeah, I think the first step is awareness, where they've compromised parts of themselves. Is it in their relationship? Is it in their friendship? You have to be aware where are you not honoring your value? Maybe it's in an intimate relationship. Maybe it's in your friendship, you're letting your friends. So I think the first step is awareness. And the second thing is actually walk them into a neurological process of repetition that their value is unconditional.
Mm.
And it's 15 days to hardwire your brain, 90 days. Wire your brain 90 days to hardwire your brain. So you have to repeat the script over and over again. And the third part is that they have to build skills. They have to know how to draw boundaries. They have to know how to hold other people accountable, how to hold themselves accountable. And this is the things that we teach in a very, I'm giving you a very kind of like fast thing, but this is something that's very systematic, because remember, it's been years of conditioning that people they doubt their value. And so to undo that requires a lot of training from within. But I'll tell you, it's freedom.
Oh, most definitely. You said something earlier to me when we were off air. She said, when a woman doesn't see her value, she can't value the man, or she can't see the man's value.
She's incapable of seeing the man's value.
Yeah. Unpack that for me.
So if I don't understand that, let me just give you an example. If I think that I can just, this is going to be controversial, but if I think that I don't value myself enough, my body, that I could just sleep around, right, with every man that I want, because I don't hold sacred my body. How can I hold a man accountable to say, you know what? I don't want you to be in a relationship where also you're not honoring your value. It's so important for me to hold a standard of the way I'm supposed to be treated with respect, so that I can hold somebody accountable when they're disrespecting me. The way I talk to myself, the way I allow other people to talk to me. Either I honor my value or dishonor my value. And when I don't know how to do that for myself, I cannot do that for somebody else. I can't see their value. I can't, see Ryan's value. And I think this happens almost, it happens all the time, but I don't think we're aware of it. It happens all the time that we don't value ourselves and we can't see other people's value, but because we're conditioned to not see other people's value, we don't think anything of it.
And so what are some of the, I know you walk through the different, like the different phases you walk them through. Talk about that process. What are some of the things that women hit when they start walking through that process that are like, oh my gosh, can I really do this? Is this going to be too difficult for me to be able to, the process too hard for me to come out? Because you said just a minute ago, when you're done, it's freedom.
Yeah. In the process, it's work, because you have to go to old wounds. You have to go back into maybe how your father treated you, maybe how you saw your mother treated your father. You have to go back into some of the stories and you need to correct it. So it does take a lot of, I would say, processing old wounds. When women for the first time realize that they really allowed other people to mistreat them, to in some ways abuse them, it's kind of eye-opening for them. I feel like part of them feels like, well, did I waste my life? Did I marry the wrong man who didn't see my value? I see a lot of that. I see a lot of women who realize, wow, my self-worth, I didn't have a good self-worth. I didn't understand my value, and I don't think I chose well. And I think I married the wrong person. And it's sad because nobody taught them.
So how do you walk them through that process if they're exactly where you just described?
You have to teach them skill after skill.
And tell me what some of those skills are.
Decision-making skills. You have to know how to make decisions for your life. You have to design your life, every part of your life. I have to know what kind of friendship I want and don't want. I need to know what kind of intimacy I want and don't want. I need to know what kind of image I want for myself, my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, my environment, my wealth, my family. There has to be clarity in what you want and you don't want. Because if you've been conditioned to be devalued, chances are you don't even consider what you want and you don't want. You've been living your life based on what everyone else wants, what everyone else thinks you should want. So paying attention to every part of our life is a first step to saying, wow, What I really want is actually to be treated with respect. What I really want is a business that's going to make me X, Y money. What I don't want is a chaotic home. What I don't want is to be criticized by my spouse. You got to lay that on the open. And every part of our life has to be accounted for. It's not just your marriage. It's not just your business. It's not just, because every part of you impacts the other. Your business impacts your marriage. Your marriage impacts your capacity to make business, your health, everything. So, we have this blueprint in our training school where you outline what you want and don't want in every part of your life. And you've got to take a hard look at it. And it's painful, Ken, because most of us are only conditioned to think of maybe the money arena or the wealth part, right? Or maybe relationship. Everything else, we've not paid attention to our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health. We might have all the millions of dollars, but we are stressed up the kazoo and we don't like our body and our kids are falling apart. We don't have a relationship with them. That's the reality. It's not our fault, but we're not taught to look at what we want and don't want in every part of our life. And that's the first step, is to acknowledge what we want. We have to mature the desires of our heart. We have to know what we don't want. And it's a process, I think, because people don't know.
Do you think one of the, I love what you said. Do you think one of the biggest things for people isn't they don't know what they do want, but they don't know what they don't want? And you said that several times so far.
Yes, it's actually, I think it's easy for me to say, oh, I want this marriage and I want that kind of house and I want this, but to identify what you don't want to put up with requires so much more processing of wounds, so much more thinking of like, what I don't want is actually a marriage where I have to ask my husband to pay attention to me. Because it requires us to go into, wait a minute, I don't like the way my parents were. I don't like the way my, that ex-boyfriend treated me. You have to actually go to wounds. You have to pay attention to the things that perhaps hurt. So it's easier for us to acknowledge what we want, but what we want actually is harder. What we don't want is harder. I remember Tony Robbins, and I did this exercise, I don't know, it was a decade ago. And he's like, what do you not want to put up with anymore? And it was honestly, Ken, the first time that I've ever asked that question. And I never thought of it of like, wow, what do I not want to put up with anymore? And TEDx that into the different parts of your life. Do I not want to put up with always being tired or, always being brain fogged or friendships for competing and comparing? Do I not want to put up with no more money?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a harder conversation to have with yourself, because you realize, ooh, I made bad choices. Ooh, that hurt. But that's actually where we learn the most, is from what we don't want.
Amazing. Because what you just described is clarity. And it's giving people clarity, not just on the vision for their life, but really the things that are going to be, because the things you don't want are the obstacles that are in the way. And I think if you can identify those obstacles, you can see them coming before they get to you, so you can avoid those obstacles, so you can actually get to where you want to go.
That's great. I mean, it's very strategically, thinking. But but we have to have somebody who's willing to actually go there. And I think that's sometimes the challenging part. The world is busy. It's going so fast. So for women to stop and pause and just say, let's just consider for a hot moment what you don't want, what you want and don't want anymore, and juxtapose that and sit with it. Sit with the pain.
Well, we don't like sitting with stuff. I don't like sitting with stuff.
Yeah, because you get to look at your life. But I think it's the first step to really taking responsibility and maturity for our life. Because the alternative is to live a life we never wanted to begin with. We're just living by default.
So good. Talk about so how you guys have been doing this together how long?
3 years, maybe 3.5 years.
Tell me about some lives that have been changed.
Oh gosh. Many divorces halted, suicide halted. Homes are completely from chaos to peaceful. Weight loss, just quality friendship. People who've never learned how to dream are now dreaming for the first time in their life. It's a radical shift, because the tools we give them are extremely practical. Everything actually has a PDF and how to design their life very intentionally. And I think that's it's unquantifiable. Even just today, I just saw the testimony of this woman who just the concept of understanding their value changed their life.
Mm.
And that's what we teach as the first step in all our trainings in unconditional worth. And I'll say that women are actually free from prison that they've lived in all their life, because their mindset is not just knowing how to think, but now we build skill set. I teach women the connection of owning your health has everything to do with managing your kitchen skills, doing it fast, not because you belong in the kitchen, but you need to own your kitchen. It's learning how to show up. It's learning how to, strategically dress how for your, for success. It's everything. It's integrated. And I think that's the part where for the first time women see their whole entire being and not just parts of themselves, not just because I'm a mom, I can't do that, but no, as a whole person. So I think the transformation is so powerful to witness, because women are finally living lives that are fully alive.
One of the things you said that I want to dive into for just a minute or two, you talked about women and their relationships, their friendships. And you talked about where they're not competing against each other, because that's hard. How do women find healthy, life-giving relationships? And what do those look like?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing is that we have to ask ourselves, do we compare ourselves to other women? Do we compete? Because that's the barrier for deep friendship. My mentor, when I was in college, the first thing she did was train me to replace comparison and get rid of it completely through a neurological process. I didn't realize that, to a point where I didn't realize that comparison was ever an issue in my life. So the first thing is that you have to ask yourself, what are you comparing yourself to other women all day long? Because it's habitual. Just like you've learned, to drink or whatever the bad habits, comparison is a bad habit. And comparison is a wall. Once again, you're judging other people's because you don't see your value, because you're comparing yourself with other women. Therefore, you can't see the value of the other woman. You're competing. So the first thing you need to do is to be aware if you are suffering, and I say suffering, comparison and competition. So you have to neurologically change that and rewire it. And number two, you need to learn how to be a friend, how to be a genuine friend to will the good of the other. And then you need to learn how to build skills in friendship, conversation skills, connection skills, listening, being present. There's so many skills that are connected to having deep, meaningful friendship. People are lonely, not because there's enough people, because they lack the skills for deeper connection. Communication is a skill set. So loneliness is not an isolation issue. It's a communication issue. I could be with you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and go deep in 5 minutes. I could be with someone for 4 hours and talk shallow and never actually fulfill the depths of my need. So how do we have that? We have to learn the skills to have that deep connection. I think when you are a good friend, you will find the good friends. What does it look like? My best friend right now, Angela, there's not an ounce of competition. There's a lot of vulnerability and trust, and you don't need a lot of it. You need depth. You need quality, few good friends. It doesn't, in the women's school, we have different types of friendship, and, that friendship where you have a mutual, really growth. There's not a lot of, you don't have a lot of time for that kind of deep friendship. But when you do, there's just freedom, there's growth, there's accountability. And that's what I have. I can go to her and say, can you hold me accountable? I'm just wrestling with this. And that's, friendships like that are need to be built. They don't just happen. But Ryan's my best friend, and, my husband, and we're best friends even as we're building a business. As
you're building a business together, which is fantastic.
I think it's pretty miraculous, honestly, because I feel like we, our marriage is stronger than ever. I think he's more in love than ever. I'm teasing. I'm more in love with him than ever. I'm more attracted to him after 16 years. And awesome. I think that it requires so much humility to be in business as a couple together.
I agree.
Because you have to grow together.
What would you say to the women and even the men that are here listening to this podcast that have friendships that aren't life-giving, that have friendships that are full of comparison? What would you say to them?
I would say that you need to draw firm boundaries in that friendship. You either get rid of that friendship or draw firm boundaries, because I think it's sucking your energy. And you need to switch that friendship from a mutual friendship to a mentor friendship. When you've got friendships that are comparing, you should see it with compassion and find a way to mentor them, meaning that your time with them is not a place for you to actually kind of go back and forth and receive. You're pouring into them. So it changes. You're not expecting something from, that's a good way to look at it. It's a mentor friendship, but I would draw boundaries. There's not a lot of time in this world that we have. So we need to have quality friendships. And if people are incapable of having that quality of friendship, that's, that's us not actually being a steward of our time and our energy.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Friendships are very powerful. Friendships, what's the purpose of friendship? Is to accompany us and hold us accountable to who we were created to be. That's the purpose of friendship. But people don't know that that's the purpose of friendship, to hold me accountable to who I was created to be. We hang out, which is great, but that's not the purpose of friendship.
Mm-hmm.
We need to train people how to actually be a friend. I mean, do you know loneliness is a pandemic. It's an international crisis. And to me, that signals a lack of skill and understanding the magnitude and the depth of the quality of friendship that God designed for us. We waste a lot of time with people unfulfilled because we don't know what we want and we don't know what we don't want in friendship.
So good. That's so good. Best place for people to be able to connect with you, January?
The womenschool.com website.
We had this conversation already.
Dustin, no. That's the best person.
That's exactly right.
Instagram, I am now on TikTok, January Donovan, or the Women's School, womenschool.com. We're on Facebook, and you can, just find us there, follow us there. And you can email us, join us in the Women's School Masterclass, where we have deep practical training. That's where you really kind of get to know our brand and our story, and really our purpose and our mission is to work through the material. And I think if you're a mom out there, it's the best training you can give to your child before the world usurps their value.
I love that, usurp. You don't hear that word too often.
Well, that's really what's actually happening.
That's exactly what's happening.
That's
exactly what's happening. Stealing away your identity and your authority.
Well, a mom, once again, you can't give what you don't have. So a woman doesn't understand her value. She cannot honor her daughter's value. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, listen, thank you a ton for joining us today. I am, again, note after note after note after note over here. So I've taken a ton of notes. I love it when a woman doesn't see her value. She's incapable of seeing the value of a man. So powerful. So powerful. Thank you again. Look forward to doing We're doing a ton of stuff. I can't wait to see you in Atlanta. You're going to have an unbelievable time.
I'm excited.
I think I got you connected with a couple guys already. Well, one girl and one guy. Anthony and Amberly. So I can't wait for you guys to connect. They're both amazing human beings, and I'm excited. Yeah, excited to see that. Guys, thanks for joining us on today's episode of the As the Leader Grows with my good friend January Donovan. Check her out, her podcast out, thewomenschool.com. What's your podcast called, January?
January Donovan, the Women's School.
January Donovan. There you go. Same thing. Same exact thing. January Donovan, the Women's School. Check her podcast out. Listen, if you haven't got a ticket to create, growstackdrive.com/create. You can join myself. You can join January, Amberly Lago, Anthony Trucks, John Maxwell, Ed Milet, Randy Garn, Carlos Reyes, my buddy Master Jeff, Gary Brecka, on and on and on and on and on. It's going to be a phenomenal 2.5 days in Atlanta at the end of January. Thanks. If this has added value, I'm going to ask you to do me a couple things. Number one, hit that subscribe button, snap a screenshot as you listen to this podcast, share it on your social media, tag myself, tag January, because she's actually on social media now. And we'll share that. We'll share that and give you a little love from our community and our crowd as well. But again, thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you, sir.
You are more than welcome.
I feel like this conversation was all about Roya.
Let me hang on a minute.